I'm Gilbert Cruz, editor of the New York Times Book Review, and this is the Book Review Podcast. It's August, which means we have just a few more weeks to get our summers in. A few more weeks before school starts again, before we're buried by the annual onslaught of fall books. And it also means there's just a few more weeks to read the last of your summer books. And on this week's episode, we're talking about what we've read this summer, what we are reading, and maybe what we're hoping to read. Joining me is fellow book review editor Joumana Khatib. Hello, Joumana.
Hi, Gilbert.
And Anna Dubenko, the Times' newsroom head of audience, who previously appeared on our book club episode discussing Barbara Kingsolver's Demon Copperhead. Welcome back, Anna.
Thank you for having me back.
Were you surprised that New York Times readers voted Demon Copperhead the number one book of the past 25 years?
No, I was not, and I really hope that many of those readers did not listen to that episode of the podcast where I shared that I liked the book but didn't love it.
We are here to talk about books that we've been reading this summer. There are only three of us. We're not going to be comprehensive, so this is going to be very idiosyncratic. But I'd love to start with Joumana, who is always incredibly prepared for these episodes, to talk about one book that she's been reading and that she's been loving.
My reading this summer has been unbelievably chaotic, unsystematic. Usually I go into the summer with a plan. Usually this is a time when I read a lot because I am prone to summer blues, and this is a way to stave off despair. So one thing that I've been dipping into all summer has been Linda Rosencrantz's book called Talk. And it's like nonfiction that's been pushed. It's like watching taffy being made, where basically this woman, Linda Rosencrantz, recorded conversations in the 60s. She took the transcripts, she edited them down, turned them into something resembling fiction, resembling a novel, but it sounds like real, genuine spoken speech. And I like this almost as snack reading because the scenes don't necessarily have to do with one another, so you can dip in and out. You don't have to be fully awake when you're reading it. It's good when your brain is getting broiled on the beach.
Why have you taken such a different approach to reading this summer? So I remember you writing in a newsletter about how your summers were all I'm going to read all of this author this summer. What changed?
Oh, I'm just reevaluating things. I'm out of my Saturn return now. I'm trying to figure out who I am. Finally, I didn't think I was going to come through that intact.
Me neither.
I think you've been waiting with bated breath. So I don't know. And part of it, I know this is going to sound insane, but I moved 5 months ago and I'm still getting acquainted to where my books are in my house. So it's just sort of like stuff that's surfacing to me anyway. I'm trying to be more intuitive about it.
Do you not have shelves up yet?
I do have shelves, but I don't have enough shelves.
Okay.
Anna has good shelves, I've heard.
I have really, really good shelves.
What makes them good?
Well, they're the only thing I've ever done to my house is put built-in bookshelves, and they're floor to ceiling, which means that if someone asks to borrow a book, I can say things like, I'm so sorry, that book is too high for me to reach. But mostly it's because I don't like lending my books out because they never come back to me.
I think most people that have a lot of books can relate to that. It's a scary thing to loan out a book. You put little stamps in your book.
It's called
like
an
library.
embosser. Yeah, I have an embosser that says, from the library of Anna Dubenko. It was a Valentine's Day gift for my husband.
Wow, he knows you so well.
Mm-hmm.
Embossers are a great tool.
They're awesome.
They're
Can
so
you
get
Get me one?
We'll see. Christmas gift. We'll see.
I've been to your house exactly once, Anna, and I was there when someone, I can't remember if they snuck a book onto your shelf to see if you would ever discover it, or they took a book. I can't remember. I'm telling you here live on the podcast.
Someone took a book?
I think they put a book on your shelf. They're like, let's see if she notices. It was like 8 months ago.
I'm going to go home and I'm going to study.
Is this the plot of Trap?
No, this is like the end of the movie, The Conversation with Gene Hackman, where he tears up his floors looking for a listening device. Anna, what have you been reading this summer?
What have I been reading? Well, can I just say, I don't believe in the idea of a summer reading or summer books. apart from if you take
came here with a manifesto.
I did. I don't get it. I know you've written about it, Joumana, but like, I don't understand, or my reading is no different depending on the season. If I go on vacation, I have more time to read, and maybe I won't bring a heavy book if I have to tote it around. But summer reading for me is the same as fall reading, is the same as winter reading. So I'll just preface this statement with that.
Great.
What have I been reading? I decided to go back to an author I had totally written off, who I had first read in high school, which is one Jonathan Franzen. I read the corrections in high school, and then I decided to pick up Crossroads, which I absolutely loved. And I can now admit for the first time that I was wrong about Jonathan Franzen. Publicly. This one thing I was wrong about.
Yeah. What did you think it would be, and why were you wrong? And why are you enjoying it?
I thought it would be ponderous. I had to read Freedom for school and hated it.
Freedom or the corrections?
Freedom I had to read for graduate school. Corrections I read for pleasure. He had contempt for his characters. I don't believe that you can write a great book if you have contempt for your characters, or as a friend put it to me, he's not warm towards his characters. But I read Crossroads and absolutely found it fantastic, and am thrilled to know that it's the beginning of a trilogy.
Can you give us 1 or 2 sentences on what it's about?
It's about a family.
Okay.
As they all are.
In the Midwest.
In the Midwest. Here we go. It's about what it means to be good. And if you can be good, if in the pursuit of that goodness, you are acting on selfish impulses. It's like the most enjoyable sort of existential, moralistic sort of theme that I've read in a long time.
So, Gilbert, what about the books you're reading this summer?
Not surprisingly, I just came back from vacation, a week off, and I brought a bunch of genre-related books, which is what I do with my vacation time, and maybe just what I do all the time. So I read a Stephen King book.
You like him, right?
Who's surprised?
Crickets.
I read his new short story collection, which is called You Like It Darker. He has written a bunch of short story collections since like 1978, and this one has a dozen stories and one novella. Have either of you read Cujo? I feel like I'm asking questions and both of you are looking at me blankly. Do you know what Cujo is?
Yes.
Wasn't there a recent headline or some controversy about whether Cujo is in fact scary?
The book or the movie?
Now you're at.
Is Cujo scary, Gilbert?
Is it scary?
I'm going to assume that neither of you have read Cujo. There's a sequel to that book, which is a book about a rabid dog who traps a mother and her son in a car. It's about a bunch of other stuff, but that's sort of like the log line. And it takes up with one of the characters 40 years later, I think. And then there's a bunch of other stuff. There's a story where someone sees a murder in a dream. There's a story with these 2 scary twin boys who start haunting this man. Just the stuff I love. The stuff I want to read at the beach. And it was great.
Can I ask a question about the sequel to Cujo, knowing nothing about Cujo 1?
Yes, that's what it's called.
Does the dog come back?
I don't want to ruin it. Okay. I don't want to tell you what happens in Cujo 1 so that when you read Cujo 2, the official name of the short story, you will be surprised. So that's one of several books that I've been reading this summer. I think we should do sort of a round robin here. Joumana, you talked about talk. What else have you been dipping into?
So on the subject of vacation reading, so a couple weeks ago, 2 friends and I rented a cabin upstate for Upstate Art Weekend. And we got there and we heard a dog barking. And I was like, oh, this is weird.
Cujo.
Cujo too. Yeah. Actually, this dog was named for Diego Maradona, which I appreciated. But the owners had forgotten that we were staying there. It was a whole thing. There was dog bark. So then I was like, okay, I have to know more about these hosts if they're like the type to have a dog named after a soccer star and floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. So I ransacked them. So I read Deborah Eisenberg's first story collection. I didn't know she started out as a playwright before she started writing fiction, but this was hysterical. It's called Transactions in a Foreign Currency. There's an entire book about a woman who tries to quit smoking and goes swimming at the Y. quitting smoking is the whole point of the book, and yet, or whole point of the story, and yet it's so much more than that. And she's so funny. It's just good to see. I think this came out in 82 or something, so just the knowledge that she's been this funny for this long is really cool.
What kind of dog was it?
He was low to the ground. He didn't have a beard. I
didn't know this was going to be a game.
Well,
I just wanted to.
I think he's in the terrier family.
Okay.
And he had an incredible set of lungs because he barked for 2 hours, right? Because we had to wait for the owners to get in from Kingston to collect their animal and mail. And so we were like picnicking outside, and this dog was just barking at us. Very cute.
And what is Upstate Art Weekend?
It's in, I think, Dutchess in Ulster County. There are just a ton of art gallerists that put on shows. And there is an absolutely, you would have loved this actually, harrowing place called The School that a bunch of New York City gallerists bought because they need it to store unsold art. So it's this decommissioned elementary school where they showed a bunch of art. It was terrifying.
What? Just because what was creepy?
Scary.
Were there? Did it
Have
not
you
have
ever
any?
been in a 1950s era school and
Were there
felt
no lights?
warm? No, it was lit,
Okay.
but it was just ominous, right? I walked in there and I felt a chill go through my spine, and I hate being
A
scared.
building full of unsold art is
Yes!
pretty ominous.
It
I agree.
is ominous. No, and I mean, and it was the linoleum showers, and then there was some really bad climate change art that almost nullified the climate change point it was trying to make. It was horrible. And so my whole point of this is saying, I don't understand why you choose to be scared. I hate being scared.
I feel like there's nothing I love more. I went to see the Nicolas Cage movie Longlegs recently. It was like a creepy serial killer horror movie.
Mm-hmm.
It just made me feel so good inside. It was great. We'll be right back. Welcome back. This is the Book Review Podcast, and I'm Gilbert Cruz. I'm joined this week by Joumana Khatib and Anna Dubenko, and we're using this early August episode to talk about what we've been reading this summer. Anna, I think it's your turn.
Yes.
What have you been reading?
Well, after we published our best books of the 21st century, I ticked off all the ones that I had read, and there were a few on the list that I hadn't read.
Just a few.
Just a handful. And I decided that would inform some of my summer reading. And I ran into Joumana, I think, on the stairs somewhere in the office. And I pointed at her and I said, Veronica, have you read it? Right? Something like that.
Oh, yes. This is emblazoned in my memory. And I remember saying, read it, loved it, voted for it.
Voted for it. I think that's what I had. A few books that were on my to-read list. And when she said she voted for it, that just knocked it to the top of my list. Unfortunately, I would not have voted for it. I'm glad to have read it so that I can be in conversation about it.
This is Veronica by Mary Gaitskill.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. Published in what? It was 2004?
Five.
It has all the elements of a book I would love, I think.
What you're going to say, of a book.
Of a book.
Yeah, spine,
Pages,
binding,
title.
typeface.
Tell us a little bit about it and then tell us what wasn't to your liking.
So it's about a woman. She's in her 40s. She's living in California cleaning. She's been in an accident, so her arm hurts. So she takes a lot of painkillers. She has hepatitis C. And you discover she used to be a model. When she was younger, she lived in the high-flying world of what I imagine models in the 70s and 80s, like their life. And it's about her experience being young and beautiful and the cruelties of that world, but also about her friendship with a much older woman, Veronica, who she met in New York and who died of AIDS. And it ping-pongs between time, places, Paris, New Jersey, New York, and then California. It's sexy. There's drugs and models and photo shoots and all sorts of really uncomfortable situations with underage girls, and sort of ruminates on beauty, right? What else does it ruminate on, Joumana? Like
ephemerality. See, okay, this is interesting because I love this book because I think that this is Mary Gaitskill at her best when she's like, she gets a lot of flack for being BDSM happy and like our most prominent sadist writer. That's actually a smokescreen for what she's doing, which is writing about like how unbearable it is to be vulnerable as a person and establish connections and be close and be intimate with people. So that's what I think Veronica's about. But I like the book, and you did not love it.
I did not love it. I started today by saying I didn't believe in summer reads, but maybe this wasn't a book for summer. Maybe this was a winter book. But also it just commands a lot of attention. You really have to, because the prose really jumps around so much, you're never sure where in time you are. You kind of have to pay like really close attention. And maybe that's not great when you're sitting by a pool and you have to make sure your kids aren't drowning, which is something I had to do this summer. So perhaps that's maybe my personal definition of a summer read.
Why did you vote for it, Joumana?
Because it's great. I think it's her best writing. And I really like her stories. I really like her. I'm interested in her. I get her Substack. It's the only one I reliably open. Sorry to my friends. But it also really, I can't think of any other novel that I've read like it. It's creates its own demotic in its own language. And I like seeing her write long on this. And it's it is an uncomfortable book, but it felt worth it to me. I was never unhappy to be reading it or bored or found it tedious, and sometimes I forget that at the end of the day, fiction really should entertain us.
Gilbert, what were you reading by the pool as your kid was swimming safely?
I was not by a pool.
No.
I was by a lake.
Okay.
And I finished a book called The Bright Sword. It's by Lev Grossman. It's a fantasy book, right? So I talked about reading some scary stories. I also read a fantasy novel. And for those of you listeners who don't listen every week, you're forgiven. But we had Lev Grossman on a few weeks ago to talk about The Bright Sword, sort of a new King Arthur tale, a new spin on the King Arthur legend. So, Anna, how much do you know about King Arthur?
Is he the one that pulled the sword out of the stone?
You got it. Yeah, that's all you need to know. So King Arthur, the tale of King Arthur has been told many times over centuries. And this picks up with King Arthur. He's essentially been mortally wounded. There's a young knight who gets to Camelot, which is his King Arthur's kingdom. He wants to be one of the Knights of the Round Table. He discovers that most of the most famous Knights of the Round Table have been killed. King Arthur is possibly dead. And then he has to figure out what to do next. And there are fairies in it. There's the sword that was in the stone, Excalibur. There's Morgan Le Fay, who's like this crazy wizard queen. Merlin is there. It's all this stuff that you've seen in all these stories, but with a more modern take. And it's a long book. It's about 600 pages or so, and I absolutely flew through it. It was such an entertaining read. I'm very, very happy I read this one.
One thing I appreciate about your reading is that you don't seem to shy away from long books. I've seen you carrying around big door stoppers.
You think I would, because by virtue of this job, I need to read a lot fast, but somehow I always find myself with 600-page books under my arm. This one was worth it.
Do you have to be at all familiar with King Arthur?
No, he does this, and we talked a little bit about this in the interview he did for the podcast. He does the very difficult work of threading throughout the book the things that most people already know, but sort of recapping it in a way that is not boring, right? So if you don't know the tale of the Sword in the Stone, if you don't know the tale of the Holy Grail, if you don't know Lancelot and Guinevere, he finds a way to essentially summarize it while putting it in the mouths of others. It's very elegantly done. I thought it was great.
Sounds like a blast.
Read it. Are you going to read it?
I might read it. I read his other one.
The Magicians?
Yes.
Yeah. It was good.
Yeah.
He's a good writer. Joumana.
Yes. Is it back to me already?
That's back to you.
Wow. It really flies when there are just three of us in the room. Okay. So One book that I reread in a weekend, it was just like a fit of sustained reading. Now, I invited a lot of controversy via the newsletter. I do love our constituents, but a couple, I don't know, maybe it was last week where I said, I don't understand people who don't reread novels. Do they cover their eyes when they walk past a painting they've seen before? Admittedly, this is a little grouchy. Maybe my blood sugar was low when I wrote this, but I do maintain that rereading novels is a wonderful virtue to have, and it is a big part of my reading life. So I reread Asymmetry by Lisa Halliday. I will admit that I was doing this sort of to just reorient myself in the canon of great men, bad literature, to summarize. And it's so good. It's so elegant and it's so sharp. This is a novel that fictionalizes the author's relationship with a much older writer who is, of course, Philip Roth. It's just so intelligent and it's delightful to watch her pull this off. It is really, really, it keeps you surprised. It's not overly invective. It's entertaining. It's thought-provoking. It's really good.
It's so good. This is where we agree. Why?
On the asymmetry of it all, yeah.
Because it is sometimes, especially books that are about writers and books, there are a lot of them. They can be tedious. Intertextual books where it's writing about writing and a page is referenced in another page and you make these connections, like really excited me when I was 20 years old and now sort of bored me. But this one feels like she's doing something really different and to borrow your word, surprising. And just that last section, I don't want to spoil it, is just, it's so satisfying. It's like unwrapping a present.
Mm-hmm. Completely agree. I'm so happy we can keep the peace on this.
Just on that one.
Well, maybe on more. Okay, so what else have you been reading?
A friend recommended a Japanese crime thriller called Out by Natsuo Kirino. It was originally published in 1997, but then translated into English in 2004. And it is not what I usually read. It is gruesome. It is grisly. It is bleak. It is, everything is moist and humid. There is dismemberment. It's set in a suburb of Tokyo for women who work overnight at a bento factory, who just lead despairing lives, get embroiled in this situation in which they have to dismember a body. And then it just gets bleaker from there. But it was so fun to read, maybe by a pool. It's okay to read.
So not your vibe usually.
Not usually my vibe.
For some reason, the gruesomeness of that book didn't bother me. I have a really weak stomach for violence, and especially in movies, I can't handle it. But for some reason, I could tolerate it almost because it was like so omnipresent. There was just no way to get around the gore of that book. I would love to see it retranslated. That's what I will say. I think the translation could have been better, but the story.
When you say that, what do you mean?
I'm if sometimes you're reading things and you see the dialogue and it just sounds so stilted, or if you don't, like, a translation should not call attention to itself. Sometimes there are books that are translated where I don't even think the translator has a good handle on the idiom of the book. There are words that authors really like to use in the same thing. They like to use the same kind of syntax. And there were several points reading that book where I thought, oof, like, I wish like Sam Bett or David Boyd would take this on, because it could be funnier and it could be sharper. And I believe it's all there in the text, and it just didn't necessarily come through. I went on a bit of a Tokyo noir spree this summer. So that's why normally I could not be this cogent about a crime novel, but here we are.
A spree. She went on a crime. I heard crime spree.
Undiscoverable.
Okay. Well, speaking of crime books or crime adjacent books, I'm reading something that's so good. It's called The God of the Woods. It's by Liz Moore. I know a lot of people are reading this one because it's been a bestseller for several weeks. So It's a very summery book. It's actually very seasonally appropriate. It takes place at a summer camp in the Adirondack Mountains, way up in upstate New York. The camp is owned by a very rich family. The camp is located on their property. They have a huge property. And when the book opens in 1975, the daughter of the family who is attending the camp for the first time has gone missing. So it starts with this amazing hook. You learn that 14 years before, her brother also disappeared from the same camp, the same property. It's a mystery. It's a crime story. It's a tale about how maybe rich people, very rich people, are not that great. Surprise, surprise. It is engrossing in not the same way that The Bright Sword was, where I felt like I was blazing through it, but in the way where it's possible that I had a dream about it last night. I had a dream that I was at camp last night as a result of this book. So I feel like it's gotten into my brain.
Did you ever go to camp as a kid?
For one summer, yes. It may not surprise you to learn I'm somewhat of an indoor kid.
I'm shocked.
So I lasted one summer, yes.
What did you not like about it?
The outdoor parts.
Mm-hmm.
I don't need to pass a swim test. I can hang back.
Do you know how to swim?
Yeah. I know how to swim.
Okay, you're saying that sort of like you don't.
In college, we had to pass swim tests. I know how to swim. I don't need to, I don't like the bug juice.
I don't know what that is. Is that what you put on yourself to?
No, like the fruit punch.
It's an actual beverage, and it's usually in some kind of large, imposing canister, and people always threaten to dump it on you. And camp is lawless. It is, if you want to expose your kids to anarchy, I think that's the place to do it.
There's no bug juice in the God of the Woods. Did you go to camp, Joumana?
I went to one summer of orchestra camp, and and then I got freaked out because I overheard my counselor saying that her boyfriend had latent typhoid, and I called my mother, who's had every disease known to man. Dysentery in 1976. And I said, should I be worried about this? And she said, you should not be calling me from camp. I'll see you in a week. And then I never went back.
Honestly, that's good parenting.
Yes.
What instrument did you play?
That does not need to be discussed on a hot mic.
Wait, Gilbert, have you finished this book?
No, I'm halfway through. And I honestly, this is great. I'm enjoying talking to you, but I would much rather be reading the book right now. That's how entertaining it is.
Did you go to camp?
I did not. Well, I went to a couple short fresh air fun kid type camps because I grew up in the city. They're like, we got to show these kids what the outdoors are. And apparently what the outdoors are in the summer are black flies.
Oh, God.
And that is not. Anyway, God of the Woods, quite good. I'm going to possibly push it on one of you.
I was going to ask to borrow it, actually.
Okay. Well, you got your dibs in first, so you get the copy. Okay, so we've talked about a bunch of books that we have read this summer. I'd love for the two of you maybe to just talk about one book with the 3 or so weeks we have left in August that you're planning to read, hoping to read, looking forward to reading.
Okay, I'll go first, and I'm going to violate your stated rule because I'm going to talk about two really quickly.
Why am I here?
Why? You're here to steer the ship.
Okay.
You're steering the canoe. So a couple years ago, I loved the book Carnality by the Swedish writer Lina Wolff. She has a new one out, new-ish. It came out in May, maybe April, and I just haven't gotten around to reading it. I can't wait. She's insane. She's very funny. That will be good. And then as a little treat, now that I'm on my rereading jag, I've been plowing through the Neapolitan Quartet specifically to get to the third book, which I remember being the best and my favorite. And I look forward to seeing if I was right 10 years ago when I read it for the first time.
And what's the title of that one?
It's called Those Who Leave and Those Who Stay. Anna,
what are you planning on reading with the rest of your August?
I, too, plan on violating the rules of this question, which is I'm properly shamed by you, Joumana, which is I am not a rereader, or I haven't been in a long time. Maybe I'll go back and reread Corrections. Should I?
Yes.
Maybe I'll do that.
That's a good idea.
I think I'm going to do that. I haven't read that book since I was very young, And now I'm wise and have a lot of life experience, including enjoying Crossroads. And then I'm currently reading a spy thriller, spy book.
Mm-hmm. That doesn't seem you.
It's not me. I'm trying new things this summer. It's Len Dayton. It's, I believe, the beginning of a trilogy. It's called Spy Hook. And I know very little about it, although I am 70 pages in. I'm enjoying
Okay.
I think someone was murdered. There's money missing. Something about Berlin. It's fun.
Sounds like my favorite movie of all time, Ocean's 12. Okay.
It's a good one.
Yeah.
Ocean's 12.
You know how
The one with the cat burglar?
among other things, yeah.
Okay.
What are you going to read?
So I feel like I have been bullied, honestly, into reading All Fours by Miranda July by someone possibly in this room.
It's a great book.
And that person is Anna Dubenko, who read this book at the beginning of the summer and could not stop talking about it.
Almost every woman I know, and there's a few, have read this book.
Yeah.
And it has generated such incredible conversation that I'm glad you're reading it, Gilbert. You'll be the second man I know
Oh, okay.
to have read the book.
And what, could you give us a little précis?
Oh, man. A woman who resembles Miranda July in many respects decides to take a cross-country road trip, but only makes it 30 minutes out of town, where she camps out at a motel and makes decisions about her life and who she is that many women of a certain age can relate to, including what is her relationship to her husband, her child, her sexuality, and her art. It's also just hilarious and very, very dirty. Yes?
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I should read this.
Yes, you should read it.
Well, that is what I'm going to do with the rest of my August. I'm going to read All Fours. I'm only going to read All Fours. Maybe I'll read it twice. I'm so glad the two of you came on to talk about what you've been reading. Joumana, as always, thank you.
Thank you, Gilbert. And so nice to have you on, Anna.
Anna, second time.
I fear this is going to be the last time.
I can't wait until the third. I can't wait until the third.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. That was my roundtable discussion with Joumana Khatib and Anna Dubenko about a few of the things that we're reading this summer. I'm Gilbert Cruz, editor of the New York Times Book Review. Thank you for listening.